We finished Ruth last week, so now we are in 1 Samuel. And 1 Samuel, it starts at the end of the Judges. So do you remember when we went over Judges, the last 5 chapters of Judges, when Israel did not have a king and they were kind of in that loop where God would raise up a judge to deliver them, and then they would start sinning again, and then they would get captured and then get in exile, and it's just like a whole circle. So God's going to raise up one more judge before Israel has a king, and his name is Samuel. So these chapters introduce Samuel. So there was Samuel's dad, and he was married to 2 wives. One of the wives had a lot of kids, and the other wife, Hannah, was barren. She couldn't have children, and this is kind of like Abraham and Sarah. So the wife that could have kids, she kind of like made fun of Hannah and gave Hannah a hard time because Hannah couldn't have kids. So Hannah went to the tabernacle, and she was just crying. Like, she was brokenhearted. Like, she was just pouring her soul out to God. And like, if you would just give me a kid, I promise I will give him back to you. She's like, I will dedicate him as a Nazarite, which is somebody that like works in the temple all the time, that's set apart for God, that works with the priests and stuff like that. God answers her prayer, and she has Samuel. So when Samuel is about 2 or 3 years old, she takes him to the priest at the tabernacle and leaves him because he's going to serve at the tabernacle full time. Now, 2 to 3 years old, that's crazy to me. But so in chapter 2, it starts off with Hannah praising God. Like, she's singing, she's praising for him for reversing situations. So I encourage you to go read chapter 2. It's a very good prayer. Meanwhile, back at the tabernacle, the priest Eli that Hannah dropped Samuel off with, he has 2 sons who are also priests, and they are crooked priests. They are corrupt. They steal the best parts of the offering. They sleep with women that's also working in the tabernacle. So a prophet comes, and he tells them that Eli's family is about to be cut off because of their sins, their son's sin, and that both sons are going to die. And God will raise up a faithful priest in their place. So then in chapter 3, Samuel keeps hearing a voice, somebody say, Samuel, Samuel. So he runs to Eli and's like, yes. And he does this 3 different times. And finally Eli realizes, and Eli was like, it's not me, go back to bed. Finally, Eli realizes that that is God calling Samuel. So he tells Eli, next time you hear it, say, Lord, here I am. I'm like ready to listen. So he hears the voice again, and he says, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. And then God tells him that he is about to cast judgment on Eli's house because Eli knew what his sons was doing, and he really didn't do anything to stop it. And the next day, Eli was like, what did God tell you? And Samuel was kind of nervous to tell him, but he ended up telling him, and Eli accepted it because he knows it's from God. Then in chapter 4 and 5, it switches from more of Samuel's story to the nation of Israel's story. And the Israelites go to war with the Philistines. And the Philistines kill both of Eli's sons, which was prophesied by Samuel. And the Philistines steal the Ark of the Covenant, and they take it back to their temple, and they put it beside their God, their little God statue. And when they wake up the next morning, their God statue had fallen face down. Like, it was almost like worshiping the Ark of the Covenant. So they set it back up, and then the next day they come in and it fell down again, but this time its head and its arms had fell off. And then God brings a plague to the Philistines, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's because the God of Israel, we got this, Ark of the Covenant, and he's judging us. So then they take the Ark of the Covenant back. Now we go to Psalms chapter 30 through 32, and all 3 of these Psalms are written by David, and they show David's raw relationship with God. He doesn't hide. He shows like his sickness. He talks about his enemies. He talks about his guilt. But he always comes back to God's faithfulness. And this just shows that we don't have to be fixed. We don't have to be perfect to come to God. He just wants us to come to him. Now we go to Job 21 through 22. And if you follow, you already know how I feel about Job. And I've been praying the Lord help me with this. But we're in round 2, about to go into round 3 of him and his friends with the same conversation. His friends are blaming him for, they're saying like, all this bad stuff has happened in your life because you've sinned. And Job is saying, I'm blameless, I've not sinned. And it's just the 3rd round that we're hearing the same thing. Job does get good towards the end, like when God starts restoring his life. That's the good part. But these friends, I just can't. And I know there's good things to be learned in it, like if we did like a Job in-depth Bible study, but just hitting the highs and the lows. So I changed scenery because I was at my daughter's volleyball practice, and now I am at home. So we're moving to Isaiah 56 through 51. So last week, the people of Jerusalem, they were captured in Babylon. They were in exile. They had been removed from their hometown. Well, now when these chapters start, they're moving back to the land. They're moving back to Jerusalem. So they're returning home and they're rebuilding their lives. And basically, the big picture of these chapters is that God wants true righteousness. He wants their hearts. He doesn't want empty religion. In fact, some of the people, they complain that God's not answering their prayer while they're fasting. And God was like, because your fasting is fake. And in chapter 56, we see the famous line that Jesus even repeats himself, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." God tells us that idling something and not being humble, that's going to cause self-destruction. If we're humble and we trust God, we'll have peace in our life. Back to the line about or the insinuating when he was like, because your fasting is fake. That just shows us that God doesn't want our empty rituals. He actually wants our heart. It goes on to say how human sin blocks a relationship with God. And then it leads to the hints to the prophecy of the Messiah coming. It says that the Messiah will come. He will preach good news to the poor, heal the brokenhearted, comfort those who mourn, and he will give beauty for ashes. Now we go to Mark chapters 1 and 2. We've already seen the same story in Matthew chapters 3 and 4, but I just want to say a few quick differences. Mark he's the shortest. He just gets straight to the point. It's like action-packed. He don't really tell the background of how Jesus was born, and when he was a little kid, he just gets straight to Jesus's ministry. One of the key differences is when Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and he was tempted by the devil. Matthew goes into a little bit more detail about that. Mark just says like he was tempted from the devil. He doesn't give the details of what the temptation was like. One thing that Mark does add to, do you remember in the story where Jesus, where the friends brought their friend to Jesus to be healed? And Mark talks about how they came through the roof. Matthew left that part out. So in Mark, we actually see that the friends lifted their friend onto the roof and put him down through the roof for Jesus to touch him, to heal him. So Mark shows us who Jesus is through actions rather than like long teachings. So this wraps up week 11. I want to share real quick the chapters that we have finished so far. We have completed Romans, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and Matthew. I will see y'all in a few days for week 12. Thank y'all.